Kate Forbes, recently the frontrunner for the SNP leadership race, has plummeted in the polls after a tough week, facing questions about her religious views. A devout member of the Free Church of Scotland, Forbes personally believes that having children out of wedlock is wrong, as is gay marriage. But should it matter what someone in politics thinks in their private life? David Robertson, who is also part of the Free Church, writes for the Spectator's website this week, and he joins me now. David, thanks for joining Spectator TV. Tell us about the Free Church of Scotland, which has been in the news this week. As of the past few weeks, a lot of people didn't really know about it.
Yeah, there are people who would know a kind of caricature where we're nicknamed the Wee Frees, and the idea is that, we're a bunch of dour, miserable Scottish Calvinists who live on the island, speak Gaelic, and never do anything on a Sunday. The caricature is the only time the Free Church would get in the news is if we announced that our policy on the nuclear bomb was we didn't want them to drop it on a Sunday. So there's a caricature thing of that. But in the 21st century, the Free Church, somewhat surprisingly, has grown. And I would say it's a conservative theologically, but not conservative politically. You can't confuse those two things. Group of about 100 churches, about 13,000 attenders, growing in the cities, declining in some other areas. But it's a Bible-believing, conservative, theologically Presbyterian church.
And can we break that down? We now know that Kate Forbes, the SNP candidate for First Minister, is a part of it. And you've repeated this phrase, theologically conservative. What exactly does that mean?
It means that we accept the Bible for what it is. Now, people say, do you mean literally? Well, it literally depends what they mean by literally. So when Jesus says, I'm a door, he doesn't mean he's wooden and got a handle. But what we mean is that we believe every word of the Bible is true, that we read it in context, in the different genres, but we think it applies to today. So we're very much a Bible-based church. Some people want to use the pejorative fundamentalist. I don't agree. I think all of us have fundamental beliefs anyway. We think that we need to apply the Bible to modern life. What we don't think we have the liberty to do is to pick and choose which bits of the Bible we like. I think it was St. Augustine who said, if you believe in the Bible what you like and leave out what you don't like, it's not the Bible you believe, but yourself. So I think that there are people who like to mock us as being somewhat ignorant. I think one of the problems in the UK is we are so influenced by American media that when people hear the word Bible believing or something, they tend to think of Southern redneck evangelical, which I think is a bit unfair on the Southern people as well, but it's a caricature, and so they tend to think of that except in Scottish terms.
You've written a piece for Coffee House on the Spectator's website, and in that piece, you mentioned that Humza Yousaf hasn't been taken to task about his faith, but he was asked on BBC Radio 4 whether he thinks gay marriage and gay sex are wrong. So why do you think that this issue is specific to Christians?
Oh, I don't think it is. I think Humza Yousaf, it's Ian McWhirter, who's an atheist, the Scottish journalist, brilliant writer, who said basically Humza Yousaf and Kate Forbes both belong to religions that condemn homosexuality and gay marriage, or homosexual practice, at least in Christianity and gay marriage. And the difference, said McWhirter, is that one of them's a hypocrite and one of them's a believer. I think that what was done with Kate Forbes was an absolute hatchet job. Everybody knew what she believed, and it's utterly irrelevant. I mean, here we are today. Humza Yousaf has just had a report about the National Health Service in Scotland, which is devastating about his management. People are dying because of that. And that's not what people are interested in. They're interested in a hypothetical of Kate Forbes, who was 20 at the time when the same-sex marriage stuff went through the Scottish Parliament, how she would have voted. There is no possibility of the Scottish Parliament voting on same-sex marriage in the next two parliaments at least. So, I mean, this is very much a hatchet job. And I think this is really unfair. People are having a go at Kate Forbes for something, holding a position that, to be honest, a third of people in the UK still hold, and that was the normal position in society up until about 5 minutes ago.
Humza Yousaf has been challenged on specifics in the Quran, and he has suggested that his progressive beliefs, he feels, can gel with his religious beliefs. Kate Forbes has been asked, as you say, about how she would have voted on gay marriage when she was a very young woman. But is the bigger question here not how she would have voted on gay marriage, but what's going to happen when other social issues come up in Holyrood? Because whilst you say in your piece that Kate Forbes has said that her beliefs would not change how she votes, she has hinted quite strongly that had she had that vote back in the day, it would have affected her vote. And perhaps the question for Scottish voters is what else might come up? I mean, the trans issue is still very much on the table in Scotland, with which she would use her personal religious leanings to legislate. That, to me, is the ultimate question for every candidate.
Well, the ultimate question, actually, it's not just personal religious beliefs. Everyone has philosophical religious beliefs, everyone. So the question is, to what extent do your personal beliefs affect things? Now, you mentioned the GRR. That's a great one. 2/3 of Scottish people actually agree with Kate Forbes on this. Isn't it ironic that we live, I mean, I find this almost laughable, that we live in a world in which when a candidate is asked, what is a transgender woman, said a transgender woman is a biological man who wants to live as a woman. And she has been reported to the NEC of the SNP for hate speech. And what's interesting about that is Humza Yousaf is the man who passed the hate speech laws in Scotland, which would mean that in theory, she could go to jail for actually saying something that is biologically, scientifically, and rationally true. So I actually don't agree that when someone says my beliefs won't affect how I vote, of course they will. Kate Forbes passionately believes, because of her time in India where her parents were serving in a charity for the poor, that she needs to do the best she can to help the poor. She passionately believes that. She passionately believes in justice. So I think it's very foolish to say you wouldn't allow your beliefs to affect. They certainly do. I have to say, I'm not sure at all what Humza believes.
To pick up on that point then, isn't the question for Scottish voters, because she is being very honest and very clear about what she believes, what the trade-offs are for them? Because as you say, the majority of Scottish voters happen to agree with Kate Forbes on the trans issue. Plenty of them will agree with her on the independence issue and lots of other issues. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who will be nervous about the concept of hate speech and what can and cannot be said that could potentially land you in prison, certainly the way it's being interpreted today. But lots of people will disagree with her about the rights for gay people to get married or her comments about having children outside of marriage. And they're weighing up which side they're more comfortable with. I mean, there are trade-offs here. And that's something that, if you know, in your own words, Kate Forbes is going to use her own beliefs if she were to become First Minister. Don't the Scottish people have the right to then weigh that up and say, well, I agree with this, I disagree with this, and you know, they might decide that the disagreements outweigh the agreements.
I agree completely. And I think the Scottish people should decide that. Who should not decide that is the Twitterati, and I'm sorry to say this, but journalists. So right now, what I'm hearing from people, so I know that a couple of days ago, thousands of messages of support were pouring in for Kate Forbes. I know that Nicola Sturgeon has got involved today because she's really shocked that Kate Forbes has not backed down. I would suggest to you that this is almost like a Jacob Rees-Mogg moment. Do you remember that time when Jacob Rees-Mogg was asked on, I think it was on ITV, Good Morning, what do you think about abortion? And he said, well, I'm against it. And you could almost see the journalist salivating. I've got him. He's dead. You know, and at the end of that, I remember that The Guardian, I think the next day, ran a headline which effectively said Jacob Rees-Mogg finished. Well, in the Westminster bubble and in the Holyrood bubble, that's true. But in the world of real people, he wasn't. And I know plenty of people, his popularity soared in the following weeks because there were plenty of people who said, I don't agree with him, but oh my goodness, thank God for an honest politician. And I think Kate Forbes, the irony here is we have people asking about a policy, and politicians should be judged on their policy. If you're going to judge people on their character, again, with all due respect, Boris Johnson would never get in, you know, and I think most politicians. We've had a bizarre situation in Scotland here where experts have been saying, if only she'd lied, done what Tim Farron did, which Tim Farron now bitterly regrets, which was a very foolish thing. I think the people who are at fault here are the people who are constantly asking her about gay sex and same-sex marriage, none of which is relevant to the policies that the Scottish government will be dealing with over the next few years. The business community love her. If you ask the business community who they want, The Tories, by the way, I'll tell you this, I know this from speaking to many Tories, Tory leaders. They kind of like Kate Forbes, but they're desperate that she doesn't get elected, because if she gets elected, the Tories are finished in Scotland, because she will win a lot of Tory votes.
I guess my last question to you is that perhaps the difference between Jacob Rees-Mogg and Kate Forbes is that Jacob Rees-Mogg has never put himself forward for the top job. And by doing that, naturally it comes with all kinds of new scrutiny. And as you say, it's for the people of Scotland to decide, it's for the SNP to decide who they want to lead the country. But if they are curious about the answers to her questions about, for example, what she thinks of having a child outside of marriage, is it not right that she's asked the questions so they at least get their answer and can make an informed decision?
No, because that's not the basis on which normal people make their decisions.
Well,
what we're concerned about in Scotland should be...
Very quickly, it might be when it comes to how would she legislate for welfare? How would she treat single-parent families? What is the SNP going to do for these people? Are these not legitimate questions to know what she thinks from first principles?
Absolutely, but that's not what they're doing. You see, when that question is being asked, it's being asked as a gotcha question. Kate Forbes, more than anyone else in the SNP leadership, is talking about poverty and everything else. That's her concern. When she's asked what is best for a child, she says, well, I think it's best for a child to grow up with a mother and father. Virtually every study agrees with that. Now, the degradation of the family is what has devastated Scotland. I used to work in housing estates in Dundee, and, I'd do kids camps, and 19 out of the 20 kids, you couldn't say to them, go home to your mum and dad. They were growing up fatherless, or they were growing up. Now, that is to say that something is the best is not to denigrate single mothers. And I think it's slanderous to imply that because Kate Forbes thinks it's best for a child to grow up with two parents, that she's attacking single parents. I don't think that's true at all. I think she will do more welfare for the poor. I mean, the SNP have been a disaster for the poor in Scotland. And I know because my city was Dundee.
But she is in the SNP. I mean, the party you're criticizing is also the party that Kate Forbes is representing.
Yes, absolutely. And believe you me, although Kate Forbes is a member of my church, I think the last chance for the SNP, is, by the way, is Kate Forbes. If the SNP want to commit suicide, they will. And they'll do it because of religion, but not because of Christianity, because of the green progressive religion, which has taken over people's minds here. We had a First Minister of Scotland who, when asked if a rapist was a man or a woman, could not answer. Now, I'm sorry, that made us the laughing stock of the world. I'm here in Australia, and people were just thinking, is this a Monty Python skit? Because it was so ridiculous. So I think Kate Forbes, people may not like her social views. A lot of people do. But I think it's deeply unfair that she's being condemned for her social views when other people's social views are not being discussed. And I think it's even worse that the real policies are not being discussed. So she should be challenged on how you're going to pay for independence. And so should all the candidates. I'm a supporter of independence, by the way, so I'll confess to that. But I still think that they've never answered that. They need to be challenged on the NHS. They need to be challenged on education. Scotland has the worst drugs deaths in Europe, if not the world. And that needs to be challenged on that. By the way, you said something very, very interesting. I need to deal with this. You said going to the top job. I'm a Democrat. And to be honest, I'm pretty well a Republican as well. And I'm far more left-wing than most of these so-called progressives, who are not progressive at all. They're a bunch of rich kids who've been indoctrinated with some stuff from Harvard and Yale and Oxford and Cambridge and think it's wonderful and think they can keep their millions and then say that they're billionaire socialists or something. I'm not like that. I think that we should have a proper democracy. I don't care if Kate Forbes is an MP, a leader, a finance minister, or the First Minister. To me, in Scotland, and I think in the UK, we don't have a presidential system. I don't want somebody who you go, oh, that's our great leader. I think Nicola Sturgeon governed like that, and I think it's been a disaster. She has left my country absolutely devastated. I think Kate Forbes has a slight possibility of being able to rebuild it precisely because of her Christian values. Kate Forbes was interviewed recently, and I saw her. 5 questions on sex. What nerve. I mean, people go, oh, you Christians are all obsessed by sex. We're not obsessed by it. It's the media that are obsessed by sex. Nothing about industry, nothing about farming, nothing about education, nothing about the NHS. And I know what the people of Scotland care more about. And it's certainly not progressive issues that seem to this bubble that people seem to live in, that they're not the issues that we're concerned about.
David, thanks for joining me.